Hey guys, I'm Chris from North Carolina, USA, part of Nomad Airsoft team, and you're listening to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. As you heard in the intro, my guest today is our good buddy Chris from the Nomad Airsoft team. Chris and I got a chance to meet finally in person at Ironhorse this year, and we had a tremendous event. There's a lot. If you've been listening to the podcast for the last couple of weeks, we can't stop talking about it because there's just so much stuff that happened. But definitely meeting Chris. I mean, we talk so much, him and I, like just in the past, just in general, and for the podcast. It was great to get to meet him and get to play. And one of the things that Chris brings to the table is that he has this huge breadth of experience when it comes to working in a military context. We've talked about that with him on the podcast. And what was cool about this experience is that we were both, like him and myself and everyone who joined us, were rolling into this event with a very large group of players who were all really on the same page about what we wanted to do, how we were going to play. Like we all had our specifics. Like some people were dressed like, surf dads, and that's cool. But like in terms of our commitment to wanting to do as best as we can, we were all on the same page. And I was really curious to see how Chris and Jimmy, who ran Foxtrot 2, so our second squad, how they would enjoy that. How their experience would play into that. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So again, I'm thrilled to have you on. It's always a blast talking to you. And yeah, meeting you in Georgia was just insane, man. It was like, it's not a dream come true, clearly, but it was definitely like a surreal moment, when you meet someone for the first time and you're like, this is the first time I've ever seen this human in real life. And yet it feels like we've been buddies for like a long time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's how I felt. Except I like how the first thing you said was, I said, you're taller than I thought.
Yeah.
How short do you think I was?
Well, see, I have this problem where I think everybody's the same age as me and everyone's the same height as me, right? So that's just what I assume about people. But it's true, though. You were taller and Jimmy was shorter. I think in my mind, I don't know, my headcanon was you're the short one and Jimmy's the tall one. And that is actually the reverse, but not by like a lot, right?
No, I'll say I think every picture too we've taken is like you can clearly tell Jimmy's like, I feel like he comes up to like middle part of my head is like the top of my head. It's like around there. And like for like now that I'm like thinking about it, I feel like I tower over him, but like I really don't. It's just but yeah.
But yeah, man, it was wild to just show up at this event with everybody and just start getting ready. And then I've been looking through some of the footage, all of my GoPro footage, and it really struck me like the whistle blew, like everyone was smoking and joking and doing whatever, and the whistle blew, and it was immediately like, all right, we are on. Like we know we're getting in the front of the tunnel. You guys are getting to building 1-8, building 1-9, whatever that looks like. And then we didn't really see you for the next like 3 hours or whatever. You guys are just doing what you're supposed to do, right? So I was really curious, just from your perspective, like how did you integrate, I guess, like rolling all these disparate people who you'd never really met before and get them all on the same page, I guess, prior to hitting the event?
So I'll say we'll back it up here to start. And really it comes down to Jimmy and I having the initial conversation after seeing the roster you were putting out. And we were kind of piecing together like who's who. And I was talking to Frosty as well and just kind of figuring out like levels of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got that from Frosty, I, was talking to Jimmy and we kind of looked at each other and we were like, all right, so this is going to be like and it's hard because, as you said, like the experience that Jimmy and I have is a lot more than anybody else in terms of like milsim, just because of the fact that we've done it in real life. Like that was our job. Mine for 5 years. Jimmy, I think, was in for 3.5. So it's like our experience is just kind of, I don't want to say like at a next level, but in a way it is, just because of like the, I guess, indoctrination process really is kind of what the best way to put it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were talking. We were like, okay, we have no real like or very few milsim experience on our team. So Jimmy was kind of like, all right, we'll just kind of take the reins and run it. And like, it wasn't weird to us though, because we had just done that at Atlantic Front. We
Hmm.
had a squad that was basically, I think, one active duty guy, and then the rest were like, yeah, this is my first event, or like, this is like my first big like milsim. They've done like day games and stuff. So we were like, it's not gonna be any different. We never really worried about it, to be honest with you.
Mm.
Knowing that like, and like it's hard because everybody thinks of milsim as this big, like vastly different experience than like day games. How different was it in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think in certain ways it was very, very different. And in a lot of other ways, it was probably just exactly the same. Like, I think some of the things that were very different were the coordination at the squad platoon level. Like, I had that exposure. I was living my best life on the radio, just like loving every minute of like talking to platoon and like figuring all that stuff out. But then when it came down to like, oh yeah, we're holding this door. I mean, it was still the same stuff that we do at every single game. It's just we did that for 2 hours and then went back to fob and then another 7 hours of play, as opposed to, well, the day's over or whatever. So yeah, that's a good question though. I think it's a fair point.
It's and that's kind of what you got to realize too with milsim and airsoft when they put it together is yes, on a structural level it's vastly different because you are working with multiple individuals, and a lot of times like we were multiple squads together, and
Hmm.
you rely on your leadership within those to coordinate and move you around. But the basic fundamentals of, hey, I need to cover this area, or hey, I need to shoot that guy over there, it's the same thing as what you do during
Hmm.
day play. Maybe on a bigger field, but
Yeah.
essentially it's the same thing. And it's not like, oh, we're going to a milsim. My, Plasto Blasto ranges 400 feet farther than normal. Like it's
Yes, that's true.
it's
Yeah.
the same thing. So your engagement distances are going to be no different than they are on any normal weekend play.
Mm.
And that's what I think a lot of people forget too is like they go into this milsim, and I don't want to say it's almost like deer in headlights, but it's just like, dude, you guys do this on a weekly basis. Some of you
Hmm.
don't do anything different. And that was Jimmy and my whole thing is like, hey, you guys do this. Just as long as you kind of like follow our lead and like we'll teach you certain things. Like that first night where we taught there were four. I think it was Zippy, Mayor, mm, Galen, and there's another one. But basically like we taught them room clearance that we
Hmm.
learned in the army. And then like that was like we were like towards index in the night portion. That next day, then I think Jimmy has sweet footage of it on his helmet cam. Is Zippy's clearing one of the lake houses and like pies a corner, bursts into the room and like zips a guy. And it was just like we taught him that in a matter of like 40 minutes, maybe. But
Hmm.
again, it's shooting, knowing where your targets are, and people do that on a weekend basis. Like it's not anything crazy. So unless you're really in that leadership role, not much changes other than just kind of like being able to follow directions pretty much. And then if you
Yeah.
want to learn things, like you have that leadership people who like are willing to teach you.
Yeah, it's funny because I know lots of people were very much looking forward to, like, other people I was talking to, like they were very much like, I'm looking forward to playing with Jimmy and Chris because I want to learn from them. Like they have a lot of knowledge. And it's true, like you have a lot of this knowledge that for a lot of airsofters is like this magical silver bullet of knowledge. It's like, oh, did the army thing. And not only did they do the army thing, but they did the infantry, like the specific trade. It's not like you were a clerk, and nothing wrong against clerks, but like that's their job is to be a clerk. It's not to be a soldier. This was your job, or Jimmy's job, right? So you have this secret knowledge, and people are like, I can't wait to work with those guys to learn as much as I can. And also other players who were more players who've been playing a really long time, they would also observe you guys and be like, wow, these guys are thinking airsofters. Like they are not worried about any, and I guess this is the experience again, like they're not worried about any of the small crap about like gear or like, whatever. It's like focused on what is the plan, what is the play, what's the strategy, where's Jimmy. like all that. That's what's going through your mind, is trying to figure all that stuff out. And this is something we talk about, on a small scale on the channel a lot, which is you want to get all this stuff baked into your muscle memory so you don't have to worry about it, so that you can think about the other stuff. Because if you're worried about, okay, how to clear the room, then that's what's going through your mind while you're trying to clear the room, as opposed to clearing the room and thinking, okay, am I supposed to shoot that guy, or is he, what's PID, or whatever. I think, though, there's one thing I wanted to mention, because I don't think I told you about this, but I had what I expect is a real milsim experience, where I was on the corner with our platoon lead, and he's like, hey, go talk to that squad and find out what the deal is. And I went over to that squad, and they were like, Echo whatever, and nobody would talk to me. They're like, we're Echo squad, you're Foxtrot, we don't care what you're doing. Like, your mission is not my mission. Like, that's fine. And so I went over, I was like, hey, who's in charge here? Like, I'm Foxtrot, whatever. And they're like, yeah, we're Echo, we don't care. And I was like, okay. Went back to the platoon leaders, like, they wouldn't talk to me. He's like, yeah, I figured. I was like, yeah. So it was, I thought it was like, I think, is that like a real milsim experience? Like,
It's so, honestly, it is all dependent on who is in charge of that squad and what type of milsim you're at. Because you have guys like Jimmy and I, where we have another squad come with us and are in our minds. And I guess, again, this is the Army mind, and especially with Jimmy being infantry. And then with me, obviously, I went through infantry basic, and then I tried to do the Green Beret route, and I just didn't get selected. So what happened is, like, it's a whole big thing, but the Army basically had a brilliant idea, shocker on that one, and they took like 50 of us and made us parachute riggers. But I have all the infantry training, like all the basic infantry training. I have my blue cord, everything like that, and then they took like 50 of us and made us riggers. I was just lucky because I got to go to third group, so I got to work with Green Berets, and I got to run with them and train with them and everything like that. So I learned kind of the ways that they do it in their smaller teams, and then Jimmy brings that infantry experience. And a lot of his leadership in his platoon were Rangers. And so it was easy to kind of mesh those together. And that's where Jimmy and I kind of get the whole, like, and this is back to what I was talking about your question, is that whole mindset of like, oh, we have a whole other squad coming up behind us. Great. That's more guns in a fight that I don't have to worry about using my people who are on a certain mission to do basic, essentially blocking positions, or, hey, I can only clear a building with 4 guys. That's 3 stories, when realistically I want 8 guys in there, because I got to have my other 4 guys on the outside pulling security as we push in. When you have another squad with you or more guns in the fight, it's easier to just be like, hey, you 8, you're going in. Your job is that building. Don't worry about anything else. The rest of us are going to take security around the building. And that's what Jimmy's whole thing was, because we had a squad meeting, like, I want to say the Wednesday before, or the Thursday before the weekend. And Jimmy went through that and was basically like, I think we had like our squad was like 13 people, something like that. And Jimmy's like, we have enough guys that, like, what he wanted to do was, if our whole squad was to take a building, like an occupied building, not just like a beginning of the game building, he would put me in a team with probably 5. We would focus on clearing the building, and he would run security especially with the 2 machine guns. And it's called, essentially the way you do it is like red side, green side, kind of like looking at an airplane. And so he explained that to, like, the squad, and he used his whiteboard like he always says he's going to do. And so, like, that's our thinking. Like, that, I think your scenario, I've only seen happen once or twice at all the mills I've been to, where another squad's just like, and it's not even like a, hey, you're a different squad. It's more just like I don't know you. You're not my friend. Like, what are you doing? Like, go away from me. And it's just like, cool. It's not like we're on the same team or anything.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shocker, but I mean, yeah, it is what it is, right?
I mean, were they SD, or were they like
they were CDF? Yeah, okay. CDF.
That's weird, because the SD guys were that. Oh god. That when we were going through and we hooked up with, I think, who was it? Was it Foxtrot? It wasn't.
Yeah.
And that guy just kept wanting to push through buildings and through buildings and through buildings. Jimmy and I both looked at each other and we were like, this is doing nothing for us, and it's basically just wasting our energy going through buildings on a line where they're not, and we're going to push up to what's called an LOA, a limit of advance, which is where that last row of building was, right before that giant opening before the lake houses on the right, and then like the Mat V on the left. And there's a certain way to clear like LOAs to get on the other side so you don't get like schwacked. But like that guy just kept wanting to push, and that's when Jimmy and I were just like, we need to take Foxtrot 1 and our squatting and leave them. Like,
just leave. Yeah.
This is a waste of time and like a waste of space for us to be here doing this.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I remember like same conversation with Sam. It's like these guys, like, for whatever reason, they're very aggressive, which is fine, but they're in charge of us. And it's like, I don't know, like we're we're supposed to be trying to do this together or whatever, and it was not very clear. And yeah, we ended up having a bit more fun, I think, when we started sort of breaking off and being like, okay, let's play the way that it makes sense for us, even though that led to a last stand and just me and like 5 other guys living up top of a building until like 16 grenades came in the window. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah,
that happens. Yeah, yeah, really. But like, how did you find, like, because we talked a little bit about how, it is just fundamentally like everything you do at a regular skirmish on the weekend, like you should just do those things, like your good fundamentals and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself or like how did you have to like interact with the squad, like in on the field? Like, were you making corrections as you saw them, or did you just let people play? Like, what was that like, and like what was the learning process, I get, like, on the fly? Because I get like doing the prep, but then once you hit, like, all that goes out the window most of the time, right? Like you just go back to doing whatever you're accustomed to, right?
So for the whole first 3 hours when we were in that building, I didn't have a squad radio. Mine broke because of the rain. So I'm like trying to call, because it was the 3-story building, and I put September as the DMR. I put her up top, and I was like, she's got the range. I told her, just go up to the 3rd floor and run your thing. Do whatever you need to do. Jimmy had a machine gun on the 1st floor. I took a machine gun up to the 2nd floor, and that's kind of how we ran it. So I was trying to talk to Jimmy, and I kept calling, and they're like, you're not coming through. I was like, what is going on? I pulled out my radio, and I like, did the whole turn it off, turn it back on thing. And it didn't do the like beep beep frequency mode. And I was like, uh-oh. So I looked at it, and I had no freaks on the screen. It was just like lines and dots, and I was like, the rain. I was like, this thing is done. So like I basically like tried the battery with another radio, and I was like, well, it's not the battery, it's the actual radio. So I was in there just essentially, I like to move. So I was like walking between floors, like coordinating with Jimmy, talking to our people. And like the only directions that we really gave were like, hey, I need you on this window, or like, hey, watch this area. And then other than that, I kind of just let them do their thing. The only corrections I really made were like, if they were trying to shoot, especially our LMGs, were trying to shoot way outside their range and like arc it, I'm like, I was like, like, don't even worry about it. Just let them go. I was like, I don't want you to waste your BBs because you have a limited number and we can't reload in the field. So like, we're limited on ammo right now. So like, if we're going to be here holding this, if they make a push, I want my LMGs fully loaded, ready to go.
Yeah.
I was like, don't even worry about ranging it. It's going to be useless. Just let them run all the way over there. We have other squads over there dealing with that stuff. I was like, worry about what we're doing. Other than that, though, nothing really needed to be said. Everybody was doing what, Jimmy and I, because Jimmy and I briefed them before of like, hey, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. We're going for it. And like, it was great. We didn't really need to make any corrections. It was, everybody did their job perfectly.
And I think it was very effective. Like, I think I remember, when we eventually, we did the tunnels for basically 2.5 hours, let's call it. You did the buildings for the same amount of time, more minus the little bit of extra time to get there that it took you, whatever. But like basically 2 full hours of just completely denying the enemy the advance of that entire section of the field. So much so that when we did link up with Foxtrot 3 for whatever that was worth, um, the
Nothing.
the discourse was, well, we've completed 98% of our objectives. And that's was only made possible by virtue of the fact that we held that corner down, which really limited the enemy. I mean, I guess from your vantage point, you could see them trying to enter the field from another area, right? Like you could probably see them, right,
Yeah.
from the third floor.
From from where the big entrance to the tunnels where you guys were, we were
Hmm.
across that little street in the next building. Because then in front of you guys was the like damaged building that's used for like rescue that we couldn't go in.
Yeah, yeah.
They were in the buildings not directly across the street from that, but diagonal across. So like
Hmm.
back. They couldn't push up because of our fire. They couldn't get through the tunnels your side going through the woods because of you guys. And then we had that other random squad, I don't remember who it was, in the like other 3-story building kind of diagonal to our right from our building.
Yeah.
So we basically had a little U-shaped blocking position and they physically could not move. They were stuck in those buildings and that was it. Like they couldn't do anything. And like my whole thought was like, I don't know why, and I guess this comes down to the fact that like, you know, as Rich is always saying, like cost is super unorganized, which they are. They don't have a great organizational structure over there. They had whole access to go up that road by the main entrance and then through the soccer field over through those buildings, like through the lake houses, and then push down. Why they didn't do that and pinch us is beyond me. Yeah, it probably would have been a firefight, but at the same time, like we were just sitting in that building. We got no resistance. Like we helped you guys out a little bit from what we could range from the tunnels, but like, you guys were taking care of everybody over there. So like my whole thought was just like, and that was what Jimmy's thought too, was like, why didn't they push? Like, yeah, you gotta walk and it like is gonna be annoying, but like at the same time, like it's better than just sitting in a building 4 streets away and doing nothing. Like,
Yeah, and I mean, the proof is sort of in the pudding because like when we would back to when I went back to fob, after we were done our shift in the tunnels, like I don't know if you saw, but they had stacks of like servers and laptops and missile parts and stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess we win then. Like, I mean, it's so much stuff. It was so much stuff. I was like, there's no way, right? But you know, like it's interesting because I know that from on the flip side of that, it didn't really make for really interesting milsim play from the standpoint of people who've played a milsim before. For me, every single thing about it was cool, right? Anytime the platoon leader was like, "Hey Phil, I need you to do this," I was like, "Oh my god, yes sir, let's go," right? Or like you're in the window and I'm telling you, "Hey, can you step back from the window?" Right? And it's like, "Oh man, that's so cool!" Like everything is was just amazing because it's the first time you're experiencing it. But I also get that from the point of view of someone who's played a lot of milsims, you're like, okay, well, this is just really one long firefight and one long area control with not a lot of other stuff to do, right?
yeah, and that was like, I wish we had more missions because I know Jimmy and I really wanted to take the squad through like building clearance and like doing SSE,
Mm-hmm.
which is sensitive site exploitations, like finding things like that. Um, and like there's certain ways to do it, and we were like excited to like go through it, show them, teach them, like, and then basically just kind of like step back and let them do it like on the next one. But
Mm-hmm.
because because of the missions, we're just like, hey, we got to hold this building, and like my thought was like, okay, we were gonna hold it for like an hour. Then when the next mission came down, we would rotate out with the squad. And then like Matt came in, he's like, I'm so sorry, guys. Like you guys, he's like, I'm glad you were there for 3 hours because we got everything done. But like I wish you guys had missions, but at the same time, like I think that's why the second day he was like basically rolling with us the whole time was just because
Yeah.
like I think he knew like one, we wanted to do things, and two, we can get stuff done.
That was so funny because when I was in the tunnels, I had a conversation with him. He said basically the same thing. He's like, "I know that this kind of sucks right now. I'm trying to get a reinforcement for you guys, but at the same time, I don't actually trust any of the squad leaders." All right, it's like, okay, well, it's we're victims of our own success, but yeah, it's true what you're saying, like around. those missions. Although I will say, again, for me, like every now and then, Steve would pull me to go do something that was just like, was it useless? Maybe, maybe not. But it was like just it was cool. So like we would go, hey, you'd like, hey, so we got a lull in the fight. Why don't you and I go and explore a couple of these side rooms and just see what that's about? Maybe there's a QR code in there we gotta scan. Who cares? There wasn't, but like that's cool. Like, oh yeah, cool. Let's do
Yeah.
that. But that's very very small scale. Like we weren't going and retrieving components or anything like that. And I also remember when we were with Foxtrot 3, they were telling us don't bother doing SSE because we have it all. And it's like that kind of sucks because you want to be opening drawers and like doing all that stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I've never understood that either. The whole like, hey, we have a bunch of stuff, like don't do that. You're basically saying like, hey, only clear 80% of the building you're going through.
Yeah.
Like that's horrible tactics.
Or just, like, yeah, but it's a game, so don't worry about too much about it. We're already winning really hard. It's like, okay, but like maybe I want to win more. I don't know, right?
Yeah, or like
But
I don't
I
care
did
about the
feel
points.
that's
Like I want
yeah,
more.
yeah. Well, especially since they don't reveal who the winner is, right? So from either side, they're both sides think they won, which actually, in the grand scheme of things, like for an airsoft event, that's the best possible scenario. If both teams go home feeling like they won the weekend, that's great, right?
Oh,
But in a more actual factual way, I think probably we did. I don't know, but anyways, they don't
yeah.
reveal the winners. We'll never know, so there's no sense in having that conversation. But I think the second day we definitely, I feel like we did a lot more stuff. Some of it more successful than others. Um, but I know the night. Well, actually, let's talk about the night portion because that was something else. When we all rolled as a squad and we're like, okay, we're going to go to the lake houses and we'll attack from the north, because they'll never expect that. Um, yeah, so that was something, right?
So that it's hard because of that wall.
Yeah,
And if that wall wasn't there, it would have been so much cooler. Because we could have taken the entire two squads over the dike into the village and like just gone through those houses and it would have been way better. The problem was the only way to get into the village, as we saw the next day, was to go all the way around to the right by that 3-story, which is where they were all just sitting.
yeah,
And it's like, could they have hit us? Probably not. But then again, you're just running exposed in a giant open area and you don't know who's in the lake houses or
yeah,
who has range in the 3rd story. So you can get hit from both sides. And that's why it was like, yeah. And that's the hard part about that field too, is that field is very linear. There's not much play around the outsides. Everything's focused directly through that city.
yeah,
And like it's fun because that's the whole point of it. Like it's supposed to be a mount site where you're like everything's in the city, but like there's got to be ways to get around it, and that's what's a little difficult with that site. Is like yes, there are, but they're giant open areas with no cover. Sorry, there's like 3 cars, but like you can't move 24 people through 3 cars very easily, especially when like 3 of them have nods.
yeah. Well, see, that was the other thing too, is that we had a whole bunch of players who were just did not have nods, which was okay when we set out initially, and then we started walking through sort of the defilade and just chilling, using that as cover or concealment, I should say, to get in position, which was great. But then by the time we were cresting the top of that hill to go down into the lake house, before we realized it was a no go, it was dark by that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you could see stuff and Jimmy could see stuff, but then I lost complete situational awareness because we're trying to coordinate like 20 guys and only 3 or 4 of you can actually see in the dark, or like it was like you and Colin and Jimmy and Sheely and Nick, I think were the only ones who were with us with nods at that time. Because Jordan and his guys who do have nods, they were in the village elsewhere or in the town
I don't
elsewhere,
know.
right?
I thought Nick went with Jordan.
Oh yeah,
It was
yes.
just me. It was just, and then I don't think
Colin was there. Yeah,
I don't think Shirley was. It was just me, Colin, and Jimmy who were running nods. It was 3 of us.
yeah, yeah. And like, yeah, so that's an extra challenge too when you're trying to coordinate a group of people who have never really played airsoft in that level of darkness either, right? Um, and you get completely turned around. I felt completely turned around. Like I was trying to talk to you, and you were trying to figure stuff out. And I was like, I don't know what to do right now. Like this is just it's completely messed up, right?
Yeah. And that's when Jimmy, so Jimmy ran off because he was going to go link up with because I talked to him after. His whole thought process was he was going to link up with the squad that was coming around the tunnels from our fob. He was going to link up, and we were going to push the right side and basically come together. And as he was over there, his backpack is like buckled on, and it like I guess the clips like broke randomly, and so he's like, crap, and so he had to like molly his backpack to his SPC. So he had to pull everything off, molly it, and then put it back on, which is why he was like, one, not on the radio, and then two, why he was like, he met us when we were walking back, and he's like, what's going on? I was like, where were you? He's like, my backpack broke. And I was just like, oh, okay. That's why you didn't respond, and we're leaving now.
Classic airsoft moment.
Yeah. And I was just like, and like, I get it. Like, and I looked at it when he told me, like, what it looks really cool the way he hooked it on there. But I was thinking, like, and I should have said something before, because what we did is every time before a big event like this, we'll do a layout. Usually it's like if it's he comes to my house and we leave from my house, we'll do a layout up in my garage. I have like 3 tables that we can lay everything out on, make sure our gear's good. Or if it's at his house, we just lay it out in his like either the living room, or he likes to do it on the guest bed that I sleep in, and I think he just likes to throw everything on the bed and get it dirty before I get in bed. But
That makes sense. That's what I would do.
yeah, I looked at the clips on there, the buckles, and I was like, that's gonna break. I was like, this is a surplus backpack, and I know you're gonna stuff a bunch of crap in there. I was like, I feel like the buckles are gonna break because it's not on another way.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, the buckles broke.
Yeah.
So I think it was just like 1 or 2 of them, and it just caused him like complete like one. He got annoyed, and he's just like, this is gonna be a nightmare now to like molly on. And so I was just like, I probably should have said something, but at the same time, like it's also kind of funny. like
Yeah.
you said, classic airsoft moment. Just like, oh, stuff breaks.
Yeah, really. I'm really curious now, just when you look back on the event, like what would you change about how you prepared with the group, like in general? Obviously, you're not preparing your own personal skills, like that's not something we're worried about in your particular context. So, like, what would you prepare differently? Like, how would you modify to be even more successful if we had to do it again, like next weekend?
I wish we had an opportunity to. And again, this doesn't really come down to our group as much. It kind of comes down to like leadership as well. Like, I wish we had a clear picture of what we were doing. That way we could sit down with like the maps and go through with our squads individually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, tomorrow morning, this is our objective. We're going to push to this building. Time frame of it is, these hours. We're going to hold it. And the reason for it is this. And then once that's done, we're going to push out and kind of clear these buildings, like do SSE, all that stuff. And like, to me, that falls more in line with what we did in the military, where like before, even just like a field exercise, when we were staying like a week in the field for like training for like our FTXs, you do what's called the sand table. And generally it's not made out of sand anymore, because who has just a table full of sand?
Yeah.
Usually what it is like you go into like a bay in your company area or your battalion AO, and it's made with like MRE boxes and duct tape and Sharpie. But it's a giant sand layout, and it's everything you need to know about the area you're moving to and like what's going on in there. So like, I wish we could have done that. That's the one thing I like doing, especially, and I think this comes down to like with me as an NCO, like I like giving my soldiers, my guys, like the biggest information advantage they can have. letting them know everything ahead of time. That way, if something goes wrong, they have something to fall back on that they know they're supposed to do. If they get separated, they know, hey, we're going to be here at these times. This is our checkpoints. Like, that's where we need to go if something happens. And then, like, they have a clear-cut mission. It's like, what if me, Jimmy, you, Steve, and, like, 3 others get hit? And we're down. We can't talk. And they don't have time to get us up. We're going back to FOB.
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to do in the meantime? If there's no clear direction or no clear objective, like, they'll probably either come back to FOB with us or they're just going to do their own thing, versus, like, they know where they're going to go. And then instead of us having to call up on the radio, like, where are you? What are you doing? We don't even have to do that. We just go to the place that, one, we were last at, see if they're still there, and then say, hey, this is the next objective. They are probably moving on to that. We need to push forward to that.
Yeah. That's a really interesting take, because I know that, especially even at the beginning, like, there was some confusion as to, like, who's supposed to go where and, like, all this kind of stuff. So I know, like, for example, Dan, who was in your squad, was talking to some of the players who what he plays with in, like, New Hampshire or whatever, and he told them that, no, we're going to building 18, right? And so then those guys are like, oh, we're going to building 18. We're like, no, that's Foxtrot 2 that's going to building 18. Foxtrot 1 is going into the tunnel, because ultimately, like, that wasn't clearly defined for anybody. It's like, okay, well, this is sort of what we want to do, and we ended up doing that, but there was no guarantees and it wasn't set in stone. Like, we didn't know, hey, especially for us, like, we didn't know we were going to be in the tunnels for 2.5 hours, in the building for 2.5 hours on the get-go. Also probably a good thing, because we might have said something ahead of time, be like, no, how about no?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, I like this idea that you're sharing of, like, and I guess, it's a military trope in, like, movies and stuff. It's like, oh, you're on a need to know basis and you don't need to know. And it's like, actually, if you're going to be doing the work, you probably need to know as much information as relates to the particular task that you're going to be doing, right?
Yeah, that whole thing about, like, I'll put it this way. The whole, like, you don't need to know, or because I said so, from an NCO shows how crappy of an NCO they are.
Yeah.
I had one that was like that, and she was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened to be that she was also, like, kind of our friend before. So, like, she would, and, like, it comes down to the whole, like, it's like, brand new NCO trying to throw your weight around and stuff. And, like, but she never gave reasons for it. It was always like, hey, Sergeant, like, why are we doing this? Because I said so. And it's just like, really? Because you said so? Because I'm pretty sure this comes down from someone else who probably told you a reason why. Like, and that was my whole thing when I was an NCO, was just like, give people reasons why.
Yeah.
People are not going to do things if there's not a reason behind it. I was getting fed up sitting in that building for 2.5 hours. So are my guys. But I generally knew the idea of why we were doing that.
Yeah.
Granted, it sucked, but, like, there was a reason behind it. Is like, hey, we were the blocking position, so they didn't take the tunnels, and our guys could run missions out of those tunnels and go where they needed to go into the city.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the reason we were in there for 2 hours, I think, also comes down to the fact that, like, if we had sand tables and timetables beforehand, we could have been like, hey, Foxtrot 1 and 2 are going to hold these buildings from 1500 to 1430. Or sorry, 1500 to 1630. As soon as 1630 hits, we need another 2 squads to push into that area, because they are going to push forward out into the city and go take care of other things. Like,
mm-hmm.
And, like, usually that's how, like, sand tables run, is, like, especially when you're, like, when we did it, we convoyed out to our FTX area. So we would call up checkpoints. You'd have certain convoys leaving at certain times, because there were like 100 plus people in the company. We can only fit so many vehicles, and we had to take so many vehicles out there for, like, training purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So different convoys had start X times at different periods, but you'd have to call up on the radio when you hit checkpoints at certain times. And it's like, you progress forward as you do that. We could have easily done that had we been more organized. The caveat to that, though, is I think Rich would have, except for that guy leaving the leadership track, came in and basically was just like, okay, I got the outboard. Hey, by the way, I'm going to go play Cost now. Bye.
Yeah, that was.
And like Rich, like that is the one thing Rich can't stand is people getting his information and leaving to go play on the other team.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is what bugs him the most out of anything. He doesn't care, like cheating on the field, whatever. Like he says, like just shoot him in the face, whatever. Deal with it. Like go get an admin, or just like come back to fob, regroup, go back out. The like pregame plan up, because that was the most information he's ever put out in an op board before.
Mm-hmm.
He put a lot in that op board, and for someone to basically get the op board and go, all right, I'm gonna go play Cost now. Bye. Like,
and still lose. And
that's like at the end of the day, that's obviously what Rich said, is like it didn't really matter, but at the same time, it's like pre-planning pisses you off.
Yeah. What was the most surprising thing for you? And to be specific about it, like what was the most surprising thing for you about the group of players that we assembled at this event? Like what did you not expect?
How well everybody coordinated and worked together.
Yeah.
No, me and Jimmy were both just like, everybody did a crazy good job. Like, especially people not having been to a milsim before, they did awesome. The nice part too is like a lot of them were like willing and open to learn too about like certain things, but it's just like there was none of the like Jimmy and I saying like, hey, we need to do this and this and this, and somebody going, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go do my own thing, and like leaving. Because that happened to me a lot of times before on like in past milsims, and I used to go play with groups of friends. Like there'd be like 3 of us, and we would be in a squad, and they would be like, we're not even going to hang out with the squad. We're going to go leave and do our own thing. And it's like, it doesn't work. Like it just doesn't. Like it's great if you want to run around and just spray a bunch of ammo and go find firefights, and that's what you want to do. Like by all means, like go for it. That's what you want to do. But like, if you're going to do it at a detriment to your squad, like it's kind of like a backstab to them. Like if you don't want to play that way, that's not your bag. Like fine, but like at least say something. In my opinion, like go to squad and be like, hey, we just want to run around and find firefights and like just go like waste a bunch of BBs. Like if I got people who came to me and said that, I'd be like, all right, that's fine. Like as long as you have me on your radio and I know where you are, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
If you guys get into a fight and need our help, like please let me know, because we will get there as fast as we can. But like that was never the thing. Everybody wanted to stay together in a squad. They moved well in a squad. They moved across areas well in terms of like bounding, getting to cover. Like the fact too that like you guys utilize grenades so well, and barely any of you have used grenades before. Like
really,
it was really funny to watch, especially going to those lake houses. Like just watching the amount of grenades that went over into perfect areas. I was like, Phil's gonna go back to his field and be like, "Hey, we should have grenades now."
That's like 100% what I did.
And like I'm turning my head because like I'm picturing the moment of like where I was in like that little shipping area and like the hill.
Yeah,
I was just watching grenades go over. But I was like, this is gonna happen. They're gonna go back and want to buy these for their field. Like, yeah, it's just like it was, and like, I guess surprise isn't the right word. I was happy at how well everybody did, but like I had a feeling that like I said, they do this on weekend basis. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be anything new, and realistically, like when you have, and this is going to sound super conceited, and I don't mean it that way, but like when you have people like Jimmy and I, or like Steve, and like even you with the limited milsims you've running squads, it makes everything so much easier. Because you know directions and you can give them to where like, this is what we're doing. This is what we need to do. And in terms of like Jimmy and I, like we're pretty good at coming up with plans on like how to move people and squads to areas that we need to get to. And like, again, it comes down to the whole, like, give everybody a clear sense of direction and purpose of what we're doing and why. because then they're going to be like, oh, okay, cool, I know why we're doing this now, versus like, what are we doing here, we're just sitting here kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, you're bang on about the grenades. I had to laugh because I said to the guys, I was like, I don't want to have them at our open games when, we have like 12, 13-year-old players playing without ear pro and stuff. That's not the case. But I was like, there's no reason we can't have a private game when we're all adults wearing ear pro and using those. Like, that would be really cool. But that's an aside. I was like, yeah, having used them now,
I mean, even
I don't want one to go
limited
off in my
milsim,
hand, but still, right?
even your limited milsims though, you could put like a disclaimer on the thing, like, hey, there will be grenades there if you're younger, like we recommend ear pro.
Yeah.
Even if it's just like, go to, I don't know what like sporting goods things you guys have in Canada, but like we have like
Yeah.
we have like Dick's down here, but like go to like Dick's or Academy and get like electronic earmuffs to wear with like the electronic sound. Like you can get a pair for like $60.
Yeah.
Like, hey, disclaimer, you're young, you like having your ears, there will be pyro, like here's a great suggestion of where to go get stuff.
Yeah, or even the guys who are using who have Thunder Bees and want to use them. Like, really, we're just mostly concerned about people's hearing, right? And especially like kids. So for the random games, but for the milsim or like private games, I'm definitely thinking about how we could utilize them. I was thinking about doing. I won't share this on the recording just to keep it a surprise, but I'll tell you after.
Yes.
But yeah, there's ways that you can utilize them, and I know that at AMS they do that as well. Like they have those built bird clearers that they have that are run on propane that make loud bangs. It's like an arty sim kind of situation, and they make big noises and stuff, and it adds a lot to just the experience. I wanted, though, the last question I had for you is, what was your golden moment? We've talked about this on the podcast before, like that one coolest moment where you're just like, oh, I can't believe I did that, or this is the coolest I've ever felt. Although you used to jump out of planes, so I mean, you felt pretty cool a lot. But like, what was that moment for you that really epitomizes all of it?
There were probably two.
Okay.
I would say when we were clearing the lake houses, both days. Those are pretty. Those it was good to see everybody working in, like, especially the second day where we basically cleared that entire compound, like that whole section of houses, like as two squads working together, like pushing through, then pushing up. Like that was really cool. And then golden moment, just because it was really funny, was when our entire two squads tried to push to that 3-story and like just nobody got inside. We tried grenades, we tried smokes, like nobody got inside. Me and Colin actually got, like, everybody got hit. Me and Colin got to that door on the side, and he went around, and we were stacked up, and I looked and was like ready to go in, and I took a step, and like whole plate carrier exposed, and the dude hits me right in the nuts. I was like, really? I was like, I don't even think I called hit. I was just like, right in the nuts. I was like, you couldn't aim anywhere else. I was like, you had the whole plate carrier and you aimed there. He didn't say anything. Colin's over there laughing, and then like I look at him and he goes, all right. And he goes in the room, and I hear grenades go off, and then I see him walk out like 3 seconds later. He goes, yeah, that dude is hiding in one of the like internal like shoot house buildings. And I was just like, yeah, it's the dude who shot me in the nuts. He's like, I tried to get him for you. Like, I think those kind of like 2/3 moments were definitely the ones that were like, yeah, this is really awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, I know you didn't mention it, but the cookout with everyone was definitely, that was something else. Like getting a chance to do all that together.
That was a whole different world. Like that.
Yeah.
I didn't even like. I was thinking just golden moments like in gameplay, but that was above everything else. Like, you had 24 to 26 guys there who had never met in real life before, save for like a few, and it was literally like we had all been friends forever.
I know, it was crazy, and like jumping in the pool and like doing all the redacted things, and like just having conversations about just normal, like regular human stuff that like talking about your kids or your wife or your spouse or your whatever, or your parents, and it's just like just vibing together, I guess is the best word, or bonding is probably the right word. That was really, really special. So I am very much looking forward to doing that again next year. Maybe we'll see.
Figure out. You could always do a different event too.
Oh, most certainly. Yeah, I think Something probably not as hot would be great. Would be great. Don't necessarily want to do Georgia in July, June, July, if I can avoid it again.
You know what you should do? Go the other extreme. Do the I can't even know how to pronounce it. The Arsenal one, where it's in Indiana in November. That'd be great.
Yeah, I don't know. I live in Canada though. I know all about the cold, right? So it's all good.
Oh, dude, you get like the Midwest cold is like, because my wife's from Indiana and we went there over Christmas and like we had to. My son ended up getting like an ear infection up there, so we had to go like Christmas Eve to like the emergency room because that was the only thing that was open in her like
Mhm.
middle of nowhere cornfield town.
Wow.
And we had to go get in the car and it's like -5 degrees plus wind chill, and I'm just like, I would never want to live here. Like, I don't know how she did it for 20 plus years of her life in that cold. I would just be like, and it's like, it's flat. So there's nothing to block any wind or anything.
Mm.
And I'm just like, at this point, like, I'm just going to like go drive on black ice really quick. I hope I make it. Like,
Yeah. Well, listen, Chris, it's always great to have you on the show. I'm so, so thrilled we got to do that together. I'm really very much looking forward to doing it again, connecting at another milsim in the future. It's definitely going to happen. This opened my eyes to travel and airsoft. So, yeah, it's not, it's not so long. It's, see you next time sort of situation for sure.
definitely, definitely.
So thanks again for coming on, guys. Thanks so much for listening. That's all we got for you this week. If you want to chat with Chris and myself, the Discord's and link is in the description below. Until then, that's all we got for you. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.